Good morning. It's Tuesday, April 7th, 2020 of Holy Week. It's our second devotional that I wanted to give to you during this quarantine, this Holy Week quarantine. And yesterday, I talked about the John 12 perseverance in Jesus saying to pray for God's glory to be given and not to pray for this hour to be taken from him. That made me think that Jesus does indeed make that kind of prayer. So when is it appropriate for us to pray to take this hour away? Because Jesus does it. And so in Matthew 26, it tells us that after the Last Supper, Jesus went with them in the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter, Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground and praying, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done and not mine." My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. So I don't know if any of us are at that place right now yet. Maybe if you actually have this virus, you feel that way. Maybe you are that lonely. Maybe this has brought on depression. Maybe you have lost your job. Maybe there's something that's causing you to feel that kind of suffering. And in that moment, if you're there, you should do what Jesus did, and that's he prayed. And he did pray, "If it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken from me." So he doesn't make this demand. He doesn't tell God, you have to do it. He says, if it's possible. But then he has the important part of the prayer. That part of the prayer we don't have any problem praying. The next part where he says, "Yet I want your will to be done and not mine." He recognizes that it's not possible for that cup. Jesus is saying, if there's some other way, can we do it this some other way? But yet he knows there isn't any other way. He has to die. So what that tells me is, if to pray for this hour to pass, to pray for this cup to be taken from us, is okay as long as we are earnestly praying at the same time that God's will would be done, and not ours. That if it's done, it's not because of what we want, it's because it's what God wants. We remember that in the next verse it says, "Then Jesus returned to his disciples and found them asleep, and he said to Peter, 'Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak.'" That the disciples slept while, Jesus says, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death," and they fall asleep. Instead of praying, instead of helping, they go to sleep. And so I'm wondering right now which better describes us as we sit at home in this quarantine and the days just kind of run into each other and we don't know when this is going to end. Are we sleeping through it? Or are we earnestly seeking and praying for God's will in it? Are we asking ourselves, what can I do in the midst of this to seek God's will, to find God's will, to live out God's will? Or am I just sleeping until it's over with so I can go back to life the way that it was? I would challenge you not just to begin to pray for God's will and not our own, but to begin to earnestly seek God's will in this. What does God want for me? What can God use this for in my life? What can God do through me at this time? I think there's very practical things that we can do right now. And a lot of people are already doing them. If you can make masks, make masks. Give them to people who need them. If you can help a senior or somebody who's sick who can't get out, help them. Even I found just making phone calls and reaching out to people. It's interesting that I think that in some ways I feel more connected over the last few weeks to people than I normally do, because I've been intentional about reaching out and connecting with them, and just asking, how are you doing and what's going on? And though I know what's going on and I know they'll be at home when I call, I've talked to them as much or more in the last few weeks as I would have had this not been going on. And for me, that was, what I recognized that I need to do this in my part in this. And so I challenge you to do the same. What is it that God wants you to do in this? Especially if your soul's crushed, especially if you feel like you're grieving that much, especially if you're hurting that much, start asking God, take this away, but while it's here, what do you want me to do for you? What can I do for the kingdom? How can I help bring people to come to know you more? And how can I make this more about you and less about me? Don't sleep through it. Wake up and find out what it is that God can use this for in your life and for the lives of the people around you.